Track 7. Nightmares. Keith isn't new to new places. His entire life has been spent in new places. New rooms, temporary spaces, never staying somewhere long enough to call it a home. He's only gotten close a few times. With his dad, with Shiro, at the garrison, with Lance. More often than not, home has been with people, not a place. So beds? Disposable. Rooms? Temporary shelter. A place to stay. A place to rest. A place to take stock, prepare, and then move on. He's been moving on a lot. He's good at it. He's good at welcoming the new and forgetting the old. He's good at letting go, never turning around, facing forward. So why is he having such a hard time adjusting now? He knows why, but he doesn't want to admit it. He's let go once. Why can't he now? Probably because he's gotten a taste of something good. Something he hasn't had in a long, long time. A taste of a place, of people, who could be home. But he had left, and there's no reason for him to be dwelling on it now. He's already accepted he's not meant for a home. He's not sure he deserves one. They tried to stay connected, but that had fizzled. It's better this way. That's what he tells himself. Better for him. Better for Lance. This Ishti hotel is marginally better than the Ishti abandoned buildings he'd been staying in before. One could even say it was better than a Blade base, if only for the fact that he has some illusion of privacy. He's out of the rain. He has a room that's dark. He has a bed. The sheets smell like stale chemicals, and the floor has piss stains, but he slept in worse. So why can't he sleep? Why can't he get comfortable? Why can't he just let go? Paper thin walls, angry words from down the hall. He can hear the voices, rising and falling. A tide of emotion, wordless through the walls, but not less potent for it. It digs up old memories. A little house on a perfect little hill. A child with a million ways to feel, caught up in a hurricane. Their life wasn't pristine, but it was just short of a fairy tale. It wasn't rich, but it was theirs. His home, the one he shared with his dad, the one where they stayed, just in case she came back, the one with the ghosts of memories that were just as painful as they were comforting. Then the voices started. His dad always sent him to his room when they started. The shouting, the arguing, words lost as he pulled the blankets over his head and squeezed his eyes shut. But the emotion was still there, still strong, still made his heart race and his fear spike. What was worse was the silence that followed, the tears he found on his father's face. It happened a lot, and it always preceded change. Being forced out of their home before it was demolished, being forced from apartment to apartment. His dad losing job after job. The landlords, the drug dealers, the shady people his dad got mixed up in an attempt to keep them afloat. He heard the shouting through the paper-thin walls the nights he found his dad wouldn't be coming home. He heard it in his foster homes before he was sent back out on the streets. He heard it at the garrison after he'd get in fights with the other cadets. He heard it among the Blade before they told him leads had gone sour. He thinks about it every now and again. Regrets and what-ifs hang heavy in his chest. Now there's a ghost in the back of this room, and he doesn't like it. He falls asleep with his covers pulled up, buried in the mattress, that's stiff and surrounded by the smell of a dried sweat. Tries to fight it, fight the urge to look at his ghost. Fights the goosebumps on the back of his neck and the prickle of anxiety that runs beneath his skin. He can't face it. He doesn't think he's strong enough, and he needs to be strong. For Shiro, for himself. He can't afford to break, but it's hard to be brave when he's alone in the dark. He told himself that he wouldn't be scared, but he's still having nightmares.
The place is too quiet, and there's an itch of dread beneath his skin. But he creeps forward anyway. Mask pulled up to cover the lower half of his face. Goggles pulled over his eyes to help him see in the dark. And it's dark. That's another strange thing. He may be on the outskirts of this city, but even the outer edges are thickly lined with neon lights. They ooze out from cities, flickering and cracked, echoing into the darkness of the wastes, marking the edges of civilization. But here, there's a patch of darkness. The signs are all out. Shadows stretch, haunting and menacing. He's not used to absolute darkness. Nights are lit far more than the day, neon glass shining brighter than the sun can provide through the haze of smog. It's eerie. He doesn't like it. He presses onward. Crawls through the hallways of the old factory. He's not sure what they used to make, but there's a layer of dust and grime on all the machinery that indicates that it hasn't been used in a long, long time. There's a thinner layer of dust everywhere else that indicates no one has been here at all in a few weeks. Maybe even a month. Which means he missed them. Again. Gritting his teeth, he presses his thumb to the gemstone on his dagger. The energy blade shoots out with a flash, fighting the shadows with its familiar violet glow. He's tried every room in this god-forsaken place. All except for one. When he reaches it, he can feel the fragile ember of hope in his chest starting to go cold. He tries the door handle. Not locked, but jammed. He kicks it open, throwing his frustration and rage behind his body weight. It slams open, banging loudly against the wall and echoing throughout the empty space. Empty. Again. Another old lead. Another dead end. He straightens, running his fingers through his hair, gripping hard and pulling until he feels the sting at his roots. It helps distract him from the sting behind his eyes. It's not the first time he's been back to square one, but it's getting harder every time. He takes a deep, shuddering breath. Patience. He tells himself. He lets out the breath, feeling it waver. Watching it fog in the biting chill of the air. Patience yields focus. He sets to work. Another day, another job. He scours the factory for leads. Anything that might tell him where to look next. Where they might have gone. Where their other bases are. He pushes the sour edge of fear from his mind, burying it deep down inside himself. He can't dwell on it. Not now. He has to keep moving forward. He has to find Shiro. If he doesn't, if he can't, then he threw away his life for nothing.
News sources confirm that the Coliseum has no set location. Keith grits his teeth, feeling the ache in his jaw. The rain is heavy tonight, and the neon glow of nearby holographic billboards flickers off the downpour. It's obscure and dazzling, ominous in its own way. It's driven most people inside, especially given that the pollution in this city is bad enough to make the rain hurt. A light drizzle? Fine. A downpour? The water stings. He sits on his bike, just beneath an overhang. The street should be busy this time of night, but right now, it's barren. The occasional person pushes through the sheets of rain like specters in the dark, shadowed by umbrellas that catch and reflect the flickering neon glow. One hand held out and open, the holographic display of a circle hovers above his palm. A thin line circles the spear, flattened in Cullivan's silence. Then the line wavers, sharp edges at the clip away. Cullivan speaks. Keith, are you there? Yeah, I'm here, he sighs, running his free hand through his hair. Just... frick. Okay, so that at least explains why all of our leads are always fucking dead ends. Indeed, it seems the Colosseum moves every few weeks, or earlier if their location is compromised. Great. Just great. This information would have been great a month ago, or years ago. You know better than most just how tight-lipped Gora can be. The Empire keeps him loyal. Extracting secrets isn't an easy process. Keith scoffed slightly, a sharp exhale that could almost be a concerned laugh. Yeah? And how did you get this information? There's a pause, and then Antok is very good at extraction. It's said slowly and carefully. Monotone in just the right way to indicate that Cullivan actually finds humor in the answer. It's the closest thing he comes to making a joke. He wishes he could find more humor in it. Unfortunately, his frustration sours any bubbling amusement that might rise. Right, so where should I go now? And that's always the question, isn't it? Where to now? Where to go next? Because he's always moving, always look for something. Too afraid to stop, lest everything catch up to him. Afraid that if he stops, he'll never be able to start again. And people still need him. Shiro still needs him. He tries not to think about what he'll do once he finds Shiro. He spent too long moving, so long avoiding the ghost clawing at his back. He's afraid if he stops, it'll all come crashing down. Head north. Follow the road straight through the waste. You'll pass a smaller town. Keep going. Get to the next city. He closes his eyes, lets out a long breath. Right. Okay. Time to keep moving. They say no goodbyes, no good lucks, no stay safes. The world is too dangerous for sentiments like that, for attachments, for pleasantries. Cullivan believes in Keith because of his abilities, and it's those skills that will carry him through. Skills he's honed and trained through blood, sweat, and tears. Luck has nothing to do with it, and in this world, they're never safe. The hologram cuts out and Keith closes his fist, turning his hand over. Blunt nails dig in around the chip, pulling the force of needles to release from his skin. He winces, but the pain is temporary. He's used to it anyway. Slipping the device back into an inner pocket of his jacket, he pulls his glove back on. He zips his jacket up tight and pulls his hood over his head. It's stiffened up and made to resist the wind. He pulls his cloth mask up over the lower half of his face, adjusting his goggles until they sit right. Leaning over, his grip tightens around the handlebars. He revs the engine, feeling the familiar hum vibrate through him, ironically grounding despite the fact that the bike hovers. The lenses of his goggles flash to life, indicators pointing out the obstacles directly in front of him and highlighting the street. He'll need the help in the low visibility. Steeling himself, locking his fears down away from the light of the neon glow. He takes off down the street, rising high above the cracked pavement, hovering just below the line of flying traffic. He heads north, away from the city, just another one left behind, diving out into the pitch-black darkness of the waste, moving toward the next city. He tries to leave the ghost behind.
Another day. Another hotel room. Run down and covered in a coating of grime that's hidden by the flickering sign that hangs above. Inside, the dust and stains are hidden by the shadows. Blackout curtains hang over the window, letting in only a fraction of the daylight that's starting to rise over the city. Murky. Gray. Red. Hazy. The light streams across the room in a thin line, cutting across his face. He rests his hands against the cracked sink, leaning over it to get a good look at himself in the mirror. Smudged. Stained. Cracked. Covered in a thick layer of grime that he's pretty sure will never come out. Despite that, he can still see the dark marks beneath his eyes. Heavy and shadowed. He hasn't been sleeping. He's still having nightmares. The harsh light of day makes him look gaunt. His face hollow and sickly. Far too pale. By night, the dark splotches almost highlight his eyes. By day, they make him look just as he feels. Exhausted. Haggard. Pushing himself on the last straggling wisps of adrenaline. The marks Lance had left have already faded. He feels their absence as an ache in his chest, pulsing with each beat of his heart. If he closes his eyes, he can still feel them. Still feel Lance's teeth on his skin. The brush of his lips. The hot pant of his breath. The digging bite of his fingers. The drag of his nails. The way they desperately clung together. The betrayal in his eyes. The hurt he couldn't quite hide. The knowledge that Keith might have effed up the one good thing he has in his life and he'll never be able to go back and hear Lance, touch Lance, feel Lance. Sharp pain in his knuckles. The hot rush of blood over his skin. The bone-deep ache of impact. He opens his eyes to find the mirror in front of him shattered. His own reflection cracked and splintered. A million fractals of himself. A million ways to feel. His fist is shaking, cut and torn from the broken glass. He pulls it back slowly, wincing as pieces of the mirror fall. He knows he won't have to pay for it. Knows that the owners of this place probably won't even notice. Not with the cracks in the plaster and the stains already decorating the carpets. He steps away, pulling out his knife to cut a strip off the bedsheets. He doesn't know if they've been cleaned. He's pretty sure that even if they are, the stains are permanent at this point. He wraps the fabric around his knuckles, ignoring the sting as he moves to sit on the end of the bed. The mattress creaks and groans under his weight. He stares at the wall in front of him. There's a map of the city pinned there. Old and torn. He had found it in a 24-hour convenience store. Dug it up from a box in the back. People rarely deal in paper goods these days, but Keith prefers it. Likes to see it all laid out in front of him. He's marked all the possible locations for the Empire's current Colosseum location. There are a lot of abandoned warehouses and factories in this city. That's the most likely place they'd be. The Galra don't have enough influence here to have a building of their own to use. He's scribbled out notes, pinning them to the map. A few bits of string connect some of the pins. His eyes burn, lids feeling far too heavy. His body aches. A bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of caffeine and stimulants can shake. He wants to call Lance, but he doesn't. Knows he shouldn't. He doesn't know what he'd say, and fears he might end up saying something he'll regret. Things that will make his resolution to keep going break. Like I need you. I miss you. I love you. So he stares. Focuses on what's in front of him. He's wide awake. He's still having nightmares. He knows they'll haunt him again as soon as he closes his eyes. Nightmares with no real form. Half fused from memories and fears. His parents. His foster homes. Shiro. Lance. Everyone, leaving him behind. Him, not being fast enough to save them. Not being strong enough. Not being enough. Being more trouble than he's worth. He stares at the wall, but his thoughts are elsewhere. He needs to be looking ahead, and yet he can't stop dwelling on what he's left behind. Lance. Friends. A sense of belonging. A sense of adventure and stability all in one. A sense of contentment. He'd been happy. Something he hasn't felt in a long, long time. Lance had made him feel like he hadn't needed to run anymore. Like he could stop and everything would be fine. Like no matter how much the world spun around him, Lance would be there to hold him up. And then he'd left. Again. Abandoned Lance before Lance could abandon him. Like everyone else. Because something that good can't last anyway, can it? He's wide awake. The nightmares can't get him. He's wide awake. Wide awake. Wide awake.
There's a ghost in the back of this room, and he doesn't like it. He falls asleep with his covers pulled up, tries to fight it. But it's hard to be brave when he's alone in the dark. He wishes he had Lance, misses the weight of his body on the mattress next to him, the warmth of his arms, and the soothing rise and fall of his chest, the sound of his breath, and the caress of it against Keith's skin. He knows he'll probably never have Lance again. Just another person in his life lost to the chaos. Just like his mother. Just like his father. Just like Shiro. Only this time Keith has no one to blame but himself. He was lucky that Lance gave him a second chance. He doubts he'll get a third. Lance said he would wait for him. But Keith knows better than to hope. Empty words. Paper-thin walls. Torn. Fractured. Shattered. Lance had become his anchor in a storm. Keeping him grounded, keeping him together, bright and perfect. Now he's just another ghost that haunts Keith at night. Another regret, another fear, another loss. Never did he think he'd be coming back around, digging up old memories. He always used to be the one to let things go, to bury his fears. He locked them away in a place he never find, never touch, where they never seen the light, where they couldn't reach him, but they still haunt him. He still thinks about them every now and again. He tells himself that he shouldn't be scared. He is not new to this lifestyle. He's not new to being alone, but he's still having nightmares.
He crouches low, blade extended and held out in front of him. His blade jacket is zipped up, glowing emblem brazen on the back. The coattails flare around him, hiding the knives he has strapped to his legs, holsters and handles black to blend into his pants. There's a couple more surprises in his boots. A couple flash bombs and smoke grenades and EMPs strapped to the belts around his waist. His hood is pushed down to keep from blocking his peripheral vision, but the mask is still pulled up over the lower half of his face. The goggles are still covering his eyes. The lenses light up, giving him full vision in the dark of the warehouse. Crosshairs target the different people within sight, pulling up small pulsing dots to indicate their heart rates. He knows the markers will stay stuck to them no matter where they move, allowing Keith to keep track of their movements, even in the shadows. He's armed to the teeth. He's ready. There are 4 Galra in front of him, but he can see 2 more if he tilts his head to the right. 1 more if he tilts his head to the left. He's pretty sure there are at least 3 behind him. His grip on his blade tightens. Outnumbered, but that's fine. Nothing he hasn't handled before. This is where he thrives. When the odds are stacked against him, and it's nothing but sheer determination and a wild instinct to fight to survive. It's how he's gotten this far. It's how he'll get further. Well, one of the men tuts. He idly swings a flail in his hands. The 3 balls spin next to him, chains clacking, energy sparking and sizzling over the spikes that decorate the tips. You look a little lost, boy. Nope, Keith says, letting his lips curl into a sardonic smirk beneath his mask, letting it leak into his voice. Taunting. Watching the way the man's heart rate increases in his irritation. This is exactly where I plan to be. We know you're alone. Blades never travel alone. Seems lost to me. Might as well give up. You're surrounded. Don't kill him. He'll make a good addition to the arena. You're outnumbered, boy. Keith feels his lips curl wider. One of the Galra charges from the side. He ducks away from their swing, sidestepping and sweeping his blade up to catch theirs, knocking it away. He grabs for a knife at his thigh, unsheathing it and throwing it in one smooth motion. It embeds itself into the chest of the leader. He stumbles, flail coming to a stop at his side, looking down at the knife incredulously. It sliced straight through the armor plate on his chest. The blade's metal surrounded by a thin layer of plasma, heated and melting the area around it. Keith sprints for him. Slides under him as he stumbles and swings in his surprise, clumsy and movements jerking. Back on his feet, Keith continues to run to the edge of the room, stopping when he reaches a control panel. The Galra behind him laugh. What are you gonna do? You can't hack that system, and breaking it will cause this whole place to go on lockdown. Keith just glances over his shoulder, lips curled beneath his mask as he lifts his free hand. He's wearing gloves that cover his whole hand. Black and skin tight. Veins of purple run throughout the palm, pulsing faintly. He presses his hand down on the control panel, feeling the surge of energy beneath his hand. There's a flash of purple and a high-pitched ringing just beyond his realm of hearing, but still enough to make his hair stand on end. The display screen beneath his palm fizzles and distorts with static. A blade symbol appears. Flashes. And then the whole room goes dark. Silence for several beats of his heart. The only light is the flickering neon glow from advertisements several blocks away, faint and muddled light eerily shining through the grime-coated and cracked windows of the warehouse. And then the emergency lights above turn on. A faint and dull pulsing red. Casting silhouettes in blood for brief moments before fading. Keith's goggles keeps the crosshairs on the Galra scattered throughout the room, but he knows they see nothing but the faint, pulsing of his shadow. The echoing sound of dozens of locks disengaging fills the large room. A pause. Shuffling movement. Metal doors slowly sliding open. Who's outnumbered now? He asks into the shadows, voice low and rumbling. With every pulse of the red light, more figures pull from the darkness. Approaching the gallery, backing into the center of the room. An alarm goes off in the distance. More flashing lights from just outside the room. Brighter and more urgent. Shouting. Inside the room, things move with an eerie slowness. Banging on the doors. Muffled shouting. They fly open, and chaos breaks out. Keith dives into the fray once more. Feeling the burn in his veins. Feasting on the adrenaline. Shiro might not have been in this prison, but there are plenty of others who are. And he's getting them all out. The Galra have been training these people in a battle arena for their own entertainment, running experiments to make them stronger. Forcing them to fight for their own survival. It's clear they hadn't anticipated what would happen if those prisoners were released and turned on them. The result is a bloodbath beneath the gently pulsing red light.
He lays back on the bed. The air is stale, smelling faintly of dried sweat. It's drowned out by the bittersweet smoke that drips lazily throughout the room, steaming from a burnt-out joint smoldering on the bedside table. The mattress is hard. The sheets feel far too stiff for comfort. He leans against pillows that have definitely seen better days. His body aches, but it's not unpleasant. It's the dull throbbing that remains as an echo of the fight. It's fueled by the pulsing sensation of satisfaction, of a job well done, of doing some good for once. He stepped close to finding Shiro, crossed a place off his list, and got some good information from the prisoners he freed. And he freed some prisoners. People who, like Shiro, have been kidnapped and toyed with, and forced to fight for the Empire's enjoyment. Some of them came out with scars, missing limbs, prosthetics. Some barely looked human anymore. It makes him nauseous when he thinks about what might have happened to Shiro. He tries not to dwell on it. Instead, he lets himself bask in the radiating sensation of getting ish done, of being one step closer. He keeps the ghost at bay for now. He hopes it'll stem off some nightmares too. He sustained a few cuts that still sting when he moves wrong, and more than a few bruises. He might have fractured a rib, and the knuckles on his left hand are definitely swollen. There's a bruise on his thigh big enough to give him a limp, but he'll heal. He always does. Besides, the edge of the pain is taken off by the buzzing in his veins, by smoke curling through his lungs with every inhale. The buzz is relaxing, makes him melt into this ish-steam mattress. Still, it could be better. He tosses the little box up into the air again, watches in almost slow motion as it reaches the peak of its ascent near the ceiling before falling once more. He catches it, ignoring the sting in his left hand, then tosses it once more. A simple black box, a scanner on top, just big enough for a fingerprint. His fingerprints are programmed into it, just as the other paladins are. One of Pidge's special blends. She had given it to him before he left. He could take a hit, let the quint really take the edge off the aches, let it chase away his nightmares and pull him into a blissful blackout. But he catches it, holds the box in his hands, runs his fingertips over the smooth surface. What if it doesn't take the edge off? What if it makes it worse? What if it leaves him restless and aching for entirely different reasons? Quint reminds him of Pidge, of Karan, of Honk and Allura and Matt. It reminds him of Voltron, of racing through the city with Lance, a laugh caught in his throat, a smile on his lips. It reminds him of Lance. What if he calls Lance and says things he shouldn't? What if he calls Lance and it's too late? He presses his thumb to the scanner, watching as the light flashes, as the dispenser begins to glow. A thin, perfectly square blue sheet spits out Len's favorite flavor. He wonders if Pidge did that on purpose. His heart aches worse than his body as he throws the box across the room. The plaster on the wall cracks from the impact, but the box itself is fine. Tumbles to the floor and blinks innocently, impatiently, waiting for Keith to take the quint. Instead, he rolls over, takes the smoldering joint and closes his eyes, pressing it to chapped lips to take in what he still can. Let himself drift. Leaves the curtains pulled open so the flickering neon lights can illuminate his room. Finds comfort in them. Doesn't think he can deal with the dark again. Not alone. He feels the sting behind his eyes. Feels the warmth creating stains down his cheeks. Watches how the changing lights play off the bruised skin of his hand. Let himself drift. Let himself forget. But he can't forget. Not really. The flickering lights remind him of those in Voltron, of being on the dance floor with Lance, of losing themselves in a sea of shifting bodies, feeling the music more than hearing it, lost in each other, lost in time, lost in space. But together. He thought they'd be fine as long as they were together. Idiot. His heart squeezes as his body spasms, chest feeling tight and breath coming in ragged and shuddering out. He gasps, feeling more warmth slide down his cheeks, soaking into the already stained sheets. He curls in on himself. His body protests, but the pain is nothing compared to the way his chest tightens, barbs sinking into his heart. He lets himself feel. He lets himself get attached. A mistake. He should have known better. Caring makes it more difficult when they leave. When he leaves, he reminds himself to let go, to move on. Makes it harder to bury it deep down and forget. But he can't bring himself to regret it. He regrets a lot of things, but not Lance. Never Lance. His hand curls into the front of his shirt, eyes squeezing shut as his body rocks with the silent sobs. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. But it was worth it. All of it was worth it. It was worth it to have him, if only for a short time. There are the ghosts in the back of this room, and he doesn't like it. He falls asleep with his cover pulled up and tries to fight it.
He wakes with a start. Sweat drying cold on his skin, soaking through his shirt. Chest heaving as he can't quite catch his breath, each one shallow and ragged. His pulse hammers in his ears. Hands curled into the sheets, he stares at the ceiling, plaster cracked and tinged dark with years of smoke. The smell of his joint is long gone, leaving the room stale and sour. The voices echo in his head, fading slowly. His father's dying scream. Shiro's plea for his life. His mother turning her back. Lance's cold eyes as he spits out the barbed words designed to cut him right where he's most vulnerable. Selfish. Terrible. Manipulative. Unlovable. Too wild. Too much. Too violent. Better off alone. It takes him a moment to remember where he is. Takes him a moment longer for the dregs of the nightmare to fade. Takes several moments more for him to calm down. The room is cast in the hazy red glow of the sun. Bright and washing everything into dreary gray relief. Showing every stain. Every crack. Every bruise. He lets out a shaky sigh. He knows he won't be able to sleep again. He's wide awake. He moves to the window, legs shaking with every step. His hands have no strength, muscles still reeling from being tight and quivering with the fading effects of adrenaline. It takes several minutes, but he finally manages to wrestle open the window, getting it unstuck from years of grime and screeching as it slides open. The chill in the air is refreshing, biting through the heaviness that clings to him. It smells of smoke and smog, but it's no different than usual. He pushes himself up onto the windowsill, leaning his back against the wall. The city below looks dead. Abandoned and crumbling in the daylight. The neon advertisements turn sickly. The haze of pollution more prominent. His eyes burn with exhaustion, lids feeling heavy. His body still aches from the fight the night before. But he can't sleep. He's wide awake. He's afraid of the nightmares. He's not sure how long he stays there, losing himself as his mind drifts and eyes unfocus. It could have been hours. It could have been minutes. He watches the sun slowly sink toward the horizon. Watches the shadows start to stretch across the city. The knock at the door startles him, ripping him from his thoughts. He whips around, head spinning with the sudden movement. He waits, breath held, unsure whether or not he had actually heard it. Half convinced it had been an echo of his imagination. But there it is again. Sharper this time. More insistent. Pounding on the metal door. He stumbles off his perch on the windowsill, legs nearly giving out under him. They ache from the day before and tingle as feeling seeps back into them. Still, he falls into a cautious crouch, moving on bare feet across the room to where his things are piled. He feels better once his dagger is in his hands, finding comfort and feeling grounded with the handle nestled in his palm. He creeps toward the door, pressing his free hand in an ear to the cool metal. He can hear soft voices. A grunt. Breathing. Another knock. Pounding. Not knuckles, but a fist hitting the door. Keith winces, pulling back. Keith. We know you're in there, man. Open up. Keith's breath catches in his throat. Heart thundering in his chest. It can't be. It can't. Come on, dude. I'm tired. Pidge is gonna hack this door in like 2 seconds if you don't. His dagger clatters to the floor, hand already flying toward the button next to the door. His swollen knuckles scream in pain at the impact, but he doesn't care. Because the door is sliding open, and Lance is there. He stands with his hand raised, fist poised to knock again. He blinks in surprise, lips parted as his words die. Behind him, Hunk and Pidge crowd the hall, but Keith can only stare at Lance. He looks haggard in the daylight. The bags under his eyes are dark and prominent. There's a dryness to his skin, gaunt and notable for someone who takes such good care of his face. His lips look cracked. His eyes are lidded and tired. His hair mused and windswept. He holds himself slumped but tense, like he might fall over any moment, teetering on the last of his wakefulness. Lance. The name leaves Keith's lips in a rush of air. Lance's hand falls to his side. Despite how exhausted he looks, he manages to smile. It's small, but it shines. Lifting his cheeks and lighting up his eyes. Hey, man. And then Lance is stumbling forward. Keith thinks he might have moved too. Lance's arms wrap around him, and his own find their way around Lance's waist. They cling tight, fingers curling into shirts. He buries his face into the crook of Lance's shoulder, feeling him turn to nuzzle into his hair. He knows it's not pleasant, but that doesn't stop him. He's shaking, but that's okay. Because Lance is here. He's here, and he's solid, and he's warm, and he anchors Keith as everything spins around him. Hey, Keith. Hunk's voice. Shuffling of feet. A hand landing on his shoulder, large and solid and warm as he pats firmly. Good to see you again. He sounds just as tired as Lance looks. Do you know how hard you are to find? Pidge's voice. Sharper, but hanging heavy with her own exhaustion. There's also a fondness in there. A relief she can't hide. Even with my tracker on your ish. You move so fast, dude. Learn to stop and smell the roses. It'll make it easier for us to catch up to you. He hears the door slide shut, the automatic lock engaging. He lifts his head, turning to look at them as they push into the room. What are you? He turns back to Lance as he lifts his head. Finds his voice failing as he's faced once more with that small, tender smile. It's too soft. Too fond. Too relieved. It's not at all what he's been expected. He was prepared for rage. Betrayal. For Lance to be bitter and frustrated. He was ready for Hunk and Pidge's stealing glares and sharp words. He was prepared for them to give up on him. Not for them to chase him down several cities away, smiling at him like they're glad to see him. What's going on? He whispers. Lance lets out a long exhale, shifting his arm around Keith's shoulders as he guides him into the room. He leans heavily on Keith, feet dragging. Keith doesn't feel too steady himself, leaning into Lance's hold. They keep each other up. We came to find you. Hunk sits on the edge of the bed, bouncing a bit to test it before lying back. Not that you made it easy for us, Pidge grumbles, stalking across the room to rip the curtains closed. Throwing the room into sudden dark relief. After missing you in the last town, we've been going non-stop for almost 24 hours. I'm off King Beat. She sighs, and Keith can see her shadow as she moves toward the bed, flopping into the middle of it, crawling under the covers and curling up. Hunk hums, one pillow already thrown over his head, breath going soft and even. I don't. He turns back to Lance. He can't see him clearly, but he can feel him. I don't understand. Well, it's pretty simple, really. Lance leads him to the empty side of the bed. He lets go of Keith to sit down, unceremoniously kicking off his boots and shedding his jacket. You left, and we realized that we couldn't let you do this crazy mission of yours by yourself. He scoots back, opening his arms and gesturing for Keith to join him. He does. Movements slow and stiff. Uncertain that this is even real. But it is. Lance's body is warm, arms strong and solid as they fold around him. Keith collapses against his chest, curling into him, burying his face in his chest. Lance rests his chin atop his head, sighing into his hair. Keith's arms wrap around him, curling fists around the back of his shirt. But, why? Because we're friends, dude. We've got your back. Lance's legs tangle with his as he noses through Keith's hair, curling around him until his lips are near his ear. He shivers as warm breath caresses sensitive skin. And I shouldn't have let you go to begin with. Not again. I should have left with you. Keith feels his eyes sting. I didn't ask you to. I know. He feels his voice crack. You didn't have to. I know. Lance sighs again, voice thick with exhaustion. His hands roam restlessly and reverently over Keith's back, his sides, his thigh. But I want to. I want to be here. With you. For you. We're in this together now, Keith. You don't have to do this alone. He feels himself shaking, but Lance just holds him tighter. Doesn't say a word as Keith buries his face in his chest and as tears soak into his shirt. Does nothing but hum softly as his hands rub soothing circles into his back. There's still a ghost in the back of this room, but something has changed. He thinks, maybe, just maybe, he can face it now. It's hard to be brave when he's alone in the dark, but he's no longer alone. He falls asleep in Lance's arms, matching breaths and bodies tangled tight. For the first time in weeks, he's not haunted by nightmares.